I spent last winter throwing away celery bases, onion bottoms, and lettuce stumps, and when I finally sat down and calculated it, I had tossed out enough scraps to fill an entire windowsill garden at least 3 times over. That was the moment I realized I was literally throwing food in the trash that wanted to keep growing for me, right there in my kitchen, all winter long. So today, I am walking you through 10 kitchen scraps you can regrow on a windowsill during the coldest months of the year. No grow lights, no fancy equipment, just a sunny window and a little patience. And I have to tell you, the last one on this list genuinely changed how I think about winter gardening. I had been ignoring this particular scrap for years, tossing it straight into the compost bin, and once I finally gave it a chance, it became the most productive thing on my entire windowsill. I also have a bonus technique for you after we get through all 10. A simple trick I stumbled onto that makes almost every one of these scraps root faster and stronger. Stick around for that, because it is one of those little discoveries that just makes everything click. Here's the underlying principle that ties all of this together, and honestly, it took me an embarrassingly long time to fully appreciate it. Most of the vegetables and herbs we buy at the grocery store are still alive. The cells in that celery base, in that green onion root, they are actively trying to grow. They have stored energy, and all they need is moisture, light, and a little encouragement to start producing again. Once I understood that I was not trying to create life from nothing, but simply allowing a living organism to continue doing what it was already doing, everything about kitchen scrap gardening became so much easier. So let me share what has worked for me, starting with something most of us toss in the trash without a second thought. The first one I want to talk about is green onions, and I bring this up first because this is the scrap that hooked me on the whole idea. I had bought a bunch of green onions from the store, used the tops in a stir-fry, and was about to throw away the white root ends when my neighbor mentioned she had been regrowing hers in a jar on her kitchen counter. I thought there was no way that actually works. But I stuck 4 of those little root ends in a glass of water, set them on my south-facing windowsill, and within 3 days, I kid you not, 3 days, I had a solid 1.5 inches of new green growth. Within 2 weeks, they were 6 inches tall, and I was snipping them for meals again. Here's what makes this work so well. Keep about 1 to 2 inches of the white base with the roots intact. Stand them upright in a jar with about 1/2 inch of water covering just the roots, not the whole base. Change the water every 2 days to prevent sliminess. A windowsill that gets at least 4 to 5 hours of light is plenty. And if you want to take them to the next level, after a week in water, transfer them into a small pot with regular potting mix. Plant them about 1 inch deep, and they will keep producing for months. I have had single green onion bases give me 5 or 6 harvests through an entire winter. The flavor is a little milder than store-bought, but the convenience is unbeatable. Now, the reason green onions work so well ties directly into this next one, because the same principle of regrowing from a root base applies to something most of us buy every single week. I am talking about romaine lettuce, and this is one where I messed up several times before I got the hang of it. The first time I tried regrowing lettuce, I cut the base too short, maybe 1/2 inch, and it just rotted. The second time I left it too wet and got the same result. Here is what finally worked. Cut your romaine so you leave about 2 inches of the base intact. That extra inch makes a huge difference because it preserves more of the growth nodes where the new leaves emerge. Set the base in a shallow dish with about 1/4 inch of water, just enough to cover the very bottom, and place it somewhere sunny. You should see tiny new leaves sprouting from the center within 4 to 5 days. Now, I want to be honest with you. The regrown lettuce will not be as full or crisp as what you buy at the store. You are not going to get a whole new head of romaine. What you will get is a nice little cluster of tender leaves, enough for a sandwich or a small side salad, and that is genuinely satisfying when it is the middle of January and everything outside is frozen. Once the leaves are about 3 inches tall, I recommend moving the base into a pot with soil. Push it down so just the leaf tips are above the surface, water gently, and keep it in your brightest window. I have gotten solid harvests for about 3 to 4 weeks after transplanting before the plant starts to bolt and get bitter. This next technique is one of those things that seems almost too simple to actually work, but after seeing it produce results on my windowsill for 3 straight winters now, I am a complete convert. We are talking about celery. Specifically, that thick base you cut off and throw away every time you buy a bunch. Take that base, the bottom 2 inches or so, and set it cut side up in a shallow bowl with about ½ an inch of warm water. Put it on your windowsill and just wait. Within about a week, you will notice tiny yellow-green leaves starting to push up from the very center. The outer stalks will kind of dry out and look a little rough, and that is completely normal. Do not panic. The new growth comes from the inside. After about 10 days to 2 weeks, when you have a nice little cluster of new leaves growing, transfer the whole base into a pot that is at least 6 inches deep. Celery has a surprisingly deep root system for a kitchen scrap, so give it room. Cover the base with soil so just those new leaves are poking out, water it well, and keep it in the brightest spot you have. Now here's the honest truth. You are not going to regrow full grocery store stalks of celery on your windowsill. What you will get is a continuous supply of celery leaves and small, tender inner stalks that are absolutely wonderful for soups, stocks, and seasoning. The leaves are incredibly flavorful, actually more flavorful than the stalks in my experience, and they keep coming for weeks. I use my windowsill celery almost like an herb at this point. Now, before we keep going, I want to mention something for those of you who are finding these tips useful and want a complete system for doing this. I put together a guide called the 30-Day Kitchen Scrap Garden Protocol, and it covers 31 different crops you can regrow from scraps, not just the 10 we are covering today. It includes a $10 starter kit guide so you do not overbuy supplies, zero-waste kitchen strategies, and complete troubleshooting for every issue I have run into over the years. Things like rot, mold, leggy growth, all of it. It is 171 pages, and it is available for $17 at backyardbuddybooks.com. You can scan the QR code on screen or click the link in the description. All right, let us keep going because we have some real game changers still coming up. The next scrap I want you to start saving is one that a lot of people do not even think about. And honestly, neither did I until I read about a study from the University of California that looked at regrowth rates of common kitchen vegetables. We are talking about the base of a head of bok choy. This works almost identically to the romaine method. Cut off the leaves about 2 inches from the base, set it in a shallow dish of water, and put it on your windowsill. Bok choy actually regrows faster than romaine in my experience. I have had visible new leaf growth in as little as 2 to 3 days. The leaves that come back are tender and delicate, perfect for a quick sauté or adding to soup. Transfer to soil after about a week for longer production. What I love about this one is that bok choy seems to handle lower light conditions a little better than some of the other scraps on this list. So if your only available window faces east or west and you are getting maybe 3 to 4 hours of direct sun, bok choy is a great choice. That pairs really nicely with the next one, which takes a completely different approach because instead of regrowing from a base, you are regrowing from clippings. I am talking about fresh herbs, specifically basil, cilantro, and mint. Now, each of these behaves a little differently, so let me break it down quickly. Basil is the easiest. Take a stem cutting about 4 inches long, strip the leaves off the bottom 2 inches, and place it in a glass of water. Within 7 to 10 days, you should see white roots forming at the nodes. Once those roots are about 1 inch long, pot it up in moist potting mix. Basil loves warmth and light, so your sunniest window is ideal, and it will keep producing leaves all winter if you pinch the tops regularly to prevent flowering. Mint is almost unkillable. Same method as basil, 4-inch cuttings in water, but mint roots even faster, sometimes in just 4 to 5 days. Fair warning though, once you pot up mint, It will try to take over whatever container you put it in. Use a dedicated pot and do not combine it with other herbs. Cilantro is the tricky one, and I will be honest. I've failed with cilantro cuttings more times than I care to admit. The success rate is lower because cilantro does not root from stem cuttings as reliably as basil or mint. What works better is saving the root end of a bunch of cilantro with the roots still attached. Stick those roots in a pot of soil about an inch deep, water gently, and you will usually get a few weeks of new leaf growth. It is not as dramatic as the others, but it is free cilantro in January, so I will take it. Here is one that might surprise you because most people think of it as a summer garden crop and nothing more. Lemongrass. If you can find fresh lemongrass stalks at the grocery store, and most well-stocked stores or Asian markets carry them, look for stalks that still have the base intact, that little nub at the bottom. Trim the top down to about 6 inches, peel off any dead outer layers, and place the stalk in a glass of water with the base submerged about 2 inches. Set it on a sunny windowsill. Change the water every couple of days, and within 1 to 2 weeks, you will see roots spreading out from the base and new green blades pushing up from the top. After the roots are a couple of inches long, transplant into a pot at least 8 inches deep with good drainage. Lemongrass loves warmth, so keep it away from cold, drafty windows. I grew 3 stalks on my windowsill last winter and had enough lemongrass for tea and cooking straight through to spring. The fragrance alone made it worth the effort. Now, this next one is something I want to be upfront about because I wasted a lot of time doing it wrong before I figured out the right approach. We are talking about regrowing ginger from a piece of store-bought root. The mistake I made, and I made it for 2 full winters, was grabbing a shriveled old piece of ginger from the back of my fridge and expecting it to sprout. It did not. What you need is a plump, firm piece of ginger with visible growth buds on it. Those little bumps, sometimes with a slightly green tint, those are your starting points. Soak the piece in warm water overnight to help wake it up, then plant it about 1 inch deep in a wide, shallow pot with the buds facing up. Ginger does not need full sun. In fact, it prefers indirect light, which makes it ideal for windows that do not get strong direct sunlight. Keep the soil consistently moist but not waterlogged. Here's the thing with ginger. It is slow. You will not see top growth for 2 to 3 weeks. Sometimes, and harvestable ginger takes several months. But as it grows, you can periodically dig down and snap off a small piece of root for cooking without disturbing the whole plant. What I love about windowsill ginger is that the young root is incredibly tender and aromatic, much more complex in flavor than the mature, dried-out ginger you buy at the store. Just manage your expectations on timing, and you will be rewarded. And speaking of managing expectations, that connects perfectly to this next scrap, because this one gives you fast results if you set it up correctly, and slow, frustrating results if you do what I did the first time. Potatoes, specifically sweet potatoes. Now I know what you might be thinking. You cannot grow a full potato harvest on a windowsill. And you are right, you cannot. But what you can grow are sweet potato slips, those beautiful trailing green vines that are not only edible but honestly look gorgeous as a houseplant. Take a sweet potato, push 3 toothpicks into the middle to suspend it over a glass of water with the bottom third submerged. Make sure you know which end is the bottom, the end with the most eyes and the more pointed shape. Set it on a warm, sunny windowsill, and in about 2 to 4 weeks, you will get roots from the bottom and leafy sprouts called slips from the top. The mistake I made my first time was using a sweet potato that had been treated with sprout inhibitor. A lot of conventionally grown sweet potatoes are treated that way, which is why they sit in your pantry for months without sprouting. If yours is not sprouting after 3 weeks, that is probably the issue. Buy organic sweet potatoes for this. The slips can be gently twisted off once they are about 6 inches long, rooted in water for a week, and then potted up. The young leaves and vine tips are actually edible and nutritious, used in cooking across many cultures. And if you save those slips until spring, you can plant them right out in your garden for a full sweet potato harvest. That is a free head start on your growing season generated from a scrap you would have otherwise thrown away. All right, the second to last one on the list, and I want to set this up properly because it is surprisingly useful and almost nobody talks about it. Carrot tops. Now let me be very clear about something, and I wish someone had told me this before I wasted a whole winter waiting for it to happen. You will not regrow a full carrot from a carrot top. The taproot, that orange part we eat, that is a one-time deal. What you can regrow are the carrot greens, and here is why you should care. Carrot greens are edible, they are nutritious, and they have a lovely, fresh, herbaceous flavor, somewhere between parsley and, well, carrots. They are wonderful in chimichurri, pesto, salads, and as a garnish. Cut the top inch off your carrots, set them cut side down in a shallow dish with a thin layer of water, and place them in a sunny window. New, feathery. Green growth will emerge within about a week. Once the greens are a few inches tall, you can transplant the top into a small pot of soil for continued production. I usually have 4 or 5 carrot tops going at once on my windowsill, and together they give me a steady supply of fresh greens all winter. The key is to change the water daily when they are in the dish stage, because carrot tops are more prone to mold than most of the other scraps on this list. And now, we arrive at the last one, the one I told you about at the beginning, the scrap that genuinely changed how I approach winter windowsill gardening. For years, every time I used turmeric root in my cooking, which admittedly was not often enough, I would toss the leftover pieces straight into the compost. I did not even consider that turmeric could grow indoors because I thought of it as a tropical plant that needed heat, humidity, and months of outdoor growing conditions. I was completely wrong. 3 winters ago, a friend who grows turmeric commercially in Hawaii told me that turmeric is actually one of the most forgiving root crops you can grow on a windowsill, as long as you understand a few key things. Here's the process. Get a fresh turmeric rhizome. Most natural food stores, and certainly Asian grocery stores, carry them. Look for one with visible buds or small bumps, just like with ginger. Soak it in lukewarm water for about 12 hours. Then plant it about 2 inches deep in a pot that is at least 6 inches wide and 8 inches deep. Use a loose, well-draining potting mix. Something with perlite mixed in is ideal. The soil should stay consistently moist but never soggy. Place it in a window that gets at least 4 hours of indirect to moderate light. Now here's what blew my mind. Turmeric sends up the most beautiful broad green leaves, almost ornamental looking, within 3 to 4 weeks. It is a genuinely attractive plant. But more importantly, after about 8 to 10 months, you can harvest the rhizomes. I know that sounds like a long time, but here's the thing I did not understand until I actually did it. You do not have to wait for a full harvest. As the plant grows, you can carefully dig around the edges of the pot and snap off small pieces of the fresh rhizome to use in cooking, just like with ginger. Fresh, homegrown turmeric is incomparably more aromatic and potent than the dried powder most of us use. The first time I grated fresh turmeric from my own windowsill plant into a pot of soup on a freezing February evening, I just stood there in my kitchen thinking, I cannot believe I threw this away for years. One rhizome planted in November gave me a living, growing, producing plant that I harvested from well into the following fall. It was the most productive single scrap I have ever regrown, and it started as something I was tossing in the trash without a thought. If you only try one thing from this entire list, make it turmeric. You will not regret it. Now that we have gone through all 10, let me talk about a few common patterns that trip people up with kitchen scrap gardening, because I fell into every one of these myself. The first one is overwatering. Most of us, myself included for way too long, think that because these scraps are starting in water, more water must always be better. It is not. Once you move a scrap into soil, you need to let the top half inch of soil dry out between waterings. I lost probably a dozen scraps to rot before I finally learned to ease up on the watering can. Less water, more often checking, that is the formula. The second pattern is giving up too early. Some of these scraps, ginger and turmeric especially, take weeks before you see any visible growth above the soil. I almost threw out my first ginger pot after 12 days because nothing was happening on the surface. Underneath, the roots were developing beautifully. If you are following the steps and the piece is not mushy or moldy, give it time. 2 to 3 weeks of patience is normal for root crops. The third one is not rotating your pots. On a windowsill, light comes from one direction, and your scraps will lean hard toward the glass. I used to end up with these comically lopsided plants that eventually toppled over. Now I give every pot a quarter turn every 2 to 3 days. It takes 5 seconds, and the difference in growth symmetry is dramatic. And the last common mistake is using scraps that have been in the refrigerator too long. The fresher the scrap, the more energy it is stored for regrowth. If that celery base has been sitting in your crisper drawer for 3 weeks, it has already used up a lot of its stored reserves just trying to stay alive in there. Use your scraps within a day or two of buying them for the best results. All right, here's that bonus tip I promised you. This is something I stumbled onto by accident and then confirmed by reading research from Oregon State University Extension on vegetative propagation. When you are rooting any of these scraps in water, whether it is green onions, basil cuttings, lemongrass, whatever, add a tiny piece of willow branch to the water if you have access to a willow tree. Willow bark contains a natural compound called indolebutyric acid, which is essentially a rooting hormone. You can also make a simple willow water by cutting a few 6-inch pieces of fresh willow twig, splitting them lengthwise, and soaking them in 2 cups of warm water overnight. Then use that water for your scrap rooting jars. I started doing this 2 winters ago, and my rooting success rate, especially with stubborn cilantro and herb cuttings, improved noticeably. I would estimate I went from maybe a 60% success rate on basil cuttings to something closer to 85 or 90%. It is free, it is natural, and it gives your scraps a measurable head start on root development. Now, if you found value in these tips and you want the full system for kitchen, scrap gardening. I put together the 30-day kitchen scrap garden protocol, specifically for people who want to do this right from the start without all the trial and error I went through. It covers 31 regrowable crops with step-by-step instructions for each one, a $10 starter kit guide so you know exactly what to buy and nothing more. 0 waste kitchen strategies that go beyond just regrowing scraps and complete troubleshooting for every issue from mold to leggy growth to scraps that just will not root. It is 171 pages of everything I have learned over years of doing this, organized so you can start getting results within your first week. It is $17 at backyardbuddybooks.com. Scan the QR code on screen or check the link in the description. I genuinely believe it will save you a lot of the frustration I went through figuring all of this out on my own. You know, when I think back to all those celery bases and ginger pieces and turmeric roots I threw away before I knew any of this, it really does make me shake my head. But that is the beautiful thing about kitchen scrap gardening. It is never too late to start. Every trip to the grocery store gives you another chance to turn waste into food, even in the dead of winter, even on a single windowsill. I would love to hear which one of these scraps you are going to try regrowing first, so share that in the comments below. Happy gardening, and I will see you in the next one.